The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. It's brought to you by West Yorkshire Electrical, specialists in all things electrical. If it's got wires in it, they will work with it, from lighting to CCTV to alarm systems to school contracting work, plenty of wires in schools. But they are specialists in renewables as well. So we're thinking battery storage, EV chargers, solar panels, and as we've been mentioning in recent weeks, they have now got a team of roofers working for West Yorkshire Electrical, specialist roofers. So if you do get solar panels put on your roof, they will sort it right out. They will also do independent roof work from that as well. So look them up on your socials or go to wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Phil, let's get straight to it then. And what a weekend. I don't know about you, but I kind of promised myself I would disengage from it and have a nice relaxing weekend after Leeds got those points in the bank on Friday night. And then it all just went wild over the weekend. So should we rewind to Friday and go from there? And what was a good solid win at Hillsborough in the end?
It's not really that stage of the season where anybody can disengage. And I'm always fascinated to think about what it must be like for the players and for Farke coaching staff on a Saturday afternoon like that, when you've got what's happening at Cardiff going on, when you've got Leicester away at Hull City. You get this mantra from players and coaches constantly about focusing on their own games, on their own performances, on their own results. But it's got to be very difficult not to let your attention stray, particularly when you're on a Saturday off, having won at Hillsborough the night before. It was quite a tired game at Sheffield Wednesday. I thought really, really good win. Genuinely came away from that thinking that is a top victory for a hard Friday night there. But Farke was saying to us afterwards, really is time to just have a bit of a breather. I suspect the players will have had a decent stretch off over the weekend, or will be given some time early this week to make sure that they can recuperate a bit, because this is the first break, and it's only 9 days. The first sort of concerted break between fixtures that they've had in quite a while. It's been very, very back to back. And they have the international break coming after that, although there will be players away. The Welsh contingent will be off, and Kamara with Finland and others. But I think it felt on Friday night to Farke like, job done in that really, really busy period. And as he put it, sofa, coffee and cake. For him, I think a lot of us were feeling like that. But all in all, it goes down as a very good weekend for Leeds.
Yeah, you were predicting something a bit chaotic, weren't you? And then I woke up on Friday and sort of talked myself into the idea that actually it's possibly within us that, I don't know, maybe we're piling previous events at Hillsborough onto the game, and it might actually end up all right. And it was sort of a mixture between the two, wasn't it? Like the first half was a bit sketchy, but as soon as we got a foothold in the game, the quality told in the end. And I do wonder, do you think Leeds have been doing that a bit this season, almost waiting fixtures out, waiting for them to settle down so they can just then go on to win?
To an extent. I mean, the theme of our piece afterwards was whether or not Farke is getting quite the amount of credit that he should be getting for what is a phenomenally good run. I mean, whatever aspect of the data you choose to pick out, it's just incredibly impressive. And I think probably nothing more so than concession of 3 goals since the turn of the year, since January the 1st. It's now creeping on towards the middle of March. And that's a pretty extraordinary defensive record. And I was saying in the piece that, Leeds aren't a team that Farke lets off the leash entirely. It isn't all out attack. It isn't reckless. It isn't gung-ho. But as you see game go by, game after game go by, and ticking them off, another win on the board, it begs the question of why he would do that. It's working for him defensively. It's working for him going forward. And I think if you knew nothing about Leeds and you watch Friday's game, you would understand straight away why it is that they are in the position they're in, and why it is that they've been so good. Because there were a couple of moments for Wednesday, particularly that save from Meslier in the first half, which was kind of crucial intervention at a crucial time. And I don't think Leeds played well in the first half particularly. I don't think you could say that was the case. But defensively, they didn't give much away. Again, it didn't really look like Wednesday were going to score from the point where Leeds did. And more to the point, there were just, again, those moments of quality, those moments of class that made the difference and yielded the goals. And at 2-0, I actually thought it looked like Leeds were going to go on and score another couple, and it was going to be comprehensive, and they probably should have done. But even Firpo, it's interesting with Firpo, because last summer he could have gone, and I think last summer it was fairly clear that transfer from Barcelona had not worked, for the money that was spent on him in comparison to the way he played and his performances. It had not been a productive move. But Farke had a look at him in pre-season and basically said to the club, look, I think we're better off keeping him because I think we will get something out of him in the Championship, and I think he'll be worth having here. And defensively, there are still issues there. And Farke said that himself after Friday's game. You know, there are moments of Firpo's defending which are not ideal, but in attacking sense, that's 5 assists from him so far. And if you add it up among the fullbacks, he's got more than the rest of those that have been played this season combined. You know, 4 more than Byram, who's played a lot on the left. And that ball to the whipped cross to Bamford was an absolute beauty, and that was what cracked up to that point a fairly solid Wednesday defence who hadn't let Leeds in much, who hadn't given a huge amount away. And that is why Leeds are where they are, because that's what they do. That goal, the second goal in the second half, great touch from Bamford, lovely round the corner, pass from Rutter, Nonto finishing it off. It's the additional quality that other teams don't have. And it shines through time and time again. And I think you're right. There are occasions where Leeds do wait games out, where they do just do enough to get by. But in a 46-game season, that's what gets you up.
Yeah, on that first goal, absolutely fantastic ball. And a great bit of movement from Bamford as well, just ghosting him behind the centre-back and just getting a toe in front. Really, really enjoyed that. Any complaints about the timing? I don't think there can be, can they? The fact that it was, 12 seconds over the allotted time. It was mentioned in the post-match by their manager. It's hard to make a case for that, isn't it? When their goalkeeper, I think somebody timed out their goalkeeper as taking 50 seconds over a goal kick in injury time. So it's no surprise that a few seconds were added on.
It's a minimum anyway. And this argument goes on time and again. There was quite an interesting piece on our website actually a week or so ago, which was after the Núñez winner for Liverpool at Forest, which was talking about the fact that in American sport in particular, but you also see it in rugby, you have fairly strict buzzers, you have fairly strict timings. Full time tends to be bang on the button. Or at least everybody knows what's going on. If you watch rugby union, the clock goes red, and then at that point you're waiting for the game to stop in a way that isn't a concession of a penalty or anything like that. Whereas with football, it is open ended and it is subjective, and it is down to what the referee thinks and how he's reading the game, how he's reading time wasting and everything else. It didn't feel to me, that one on Friday, like one that you would get wildly upset about or make protestations to them PGMOL especially. It was one of those where the whistle could have gone by that point, but the game was still flowing. And you're right, it was a cracking bit of movement and Poacher's goal from Bamford. And there again, his goals just totting up. 5 assists from Firpo, who wasn't playing at the start of the season, but has come into the team and done well in an attacking sense. And again, this sort of subject that we find ourselves discussing time and time again, who in this squad hasn't really contributed at some stage? Just about everybody at some point of the season has come up with something that has helped individual results or has helped a little run of results. And it's as close as they've been to Leicester now, 3 points back. It's kind of all there for them.
Very much so. It's interesting what you're saying about the fatigue. I think my own state of mind with this is it's almost mirroring the team, if you like, a little bit. I think like the first signs of fatigue sort of crept in for me personally off the back of the Huddersfield game. And you could see like the players, they need a bit of a rest, just a chance to reset and possibly get away from this. And then Stoke rolled straight into the back of that. And I'm not saying it was laboured against Stoke, but you could tell the team weren't at 100%. They weren't all firing on all cylinders, were they? And it was the same for me. Like a little bit of a grind just to get through that game. But with the one on Friday, it's like we're all like, yes, here we go again. I'm ready for the run-in now. But then again, I do look to this. I'm like, I'm glad it's 9 days now until Millwall, because I think it'll give me a chance to reset and want to watch them again. It'll give them a chance to reset and hopefully be coming back a little bit fresher, this one, Phil. And then looking ahead to the international break, where I suppose it's the last chance to recharge the batteries, isn't it, before the big run-in. And it feels like that's something, just to return to your point on Farke, that's something Farke has managed really, really well across the course of the season. This is very much a known quantity for him, is the Championship season, and he knows what it takes to get over the line. And I think if we're seeing an outbreak of calm or quiet optimism among the Leeds fans, I think it's fueled by Farke's knowledge of the season, of this division, of what it takes to get out of this division.
Yeah, I do think you're starting to see some of that experience at this point. I mean, clearly it hasn't been a perfect season. There were the bumps in August, which I think totally related to what was going on off the pitch, and the of kind of pulling the threads together after relegation, of which there were several to sort out. But even what went on before Christmas, the away defeats that start to pile up, and then the back-to-back losses against Preston and West Brom. I think what that was asking for was just a bit of a change of tack when it came to personnel, and a bit of a refresh with the team selection, as opposed to any actual fatigue or mental tiredness or whatever else. I would say that these past couple of weeks are probably the first time, and I'd go back to the Plymouth game as well, and again, totally unsurprising because of the amount of travel involved there. But this is probably the first time where they have started to look, a little bit leggy. And I think that is big credit to them, really, and that is going to catch up with you at some point for everybody. It's too long a season for you not to go through periods where you are feeling the pace slightly. But they got themselves to March before that's really started, and it hasn't had any impact on results either. I know they dropped 2 points at Huddersfield, but it's just impossible to go on the sort of winning run that Leeds are threatening to go on. It's been, that a win at Huddersfield would have been the best ever winning run in a league season, which tells you everything about how rare that is. The Farker will think really carefully about the next international break. I think he'll be very, very mindful of using that in the best way possible to make sure that they are refreshed and they're ready to go. I suspect as well that a little bit of fatigue comes from the fact that at this point you can't really see the finishing line yet, can you? It's not that far away, and it's about to come into view. But once you get down into single figures of games, and really, to go back to what Farker has said quite a few times, once you're down to 5 or 6 to go, you really start to get it in your head about what it is that you need to do. And rather than saying we probably need 10 wins from here, you're saying to yourself we possibly need 2 or 3, and that's when you really start to taste it, and that's when I think you get a bit of a fresh flush of adrenaline again.
Playoffs nailed on, Phil. It's got to be at this stage, hasn't it? I think we need 5 or 6 points, and then even you can't jinx this one. I don't think. I
don't think I could jinx the playoffs from here, but I certainly wouldn't make any bold predictions about the top 2 at the moment. It's so hard to call. I mean, that was a really, really sore defeat for Ipswich. That one at Cardiff, that will absolutely hurt. And I think, having got so far into injury time, I did assume that was probably done and dusted. And I didn't, even at 1-1, didn't really expect Cardiff to nick that late on either. But yeah, that will sting. And admittedly, a good result for Southampton, which they managed to dig out, but they've got a bit of ground to make up. And this is kind of the critical point, isn't it, when it comes to gaps opening up? If you lose touch at this stage, you're unlikely to reel anybody back in. But the really interesting one at the moment, I think, is Leicester. 3 points now to Leeds in second, 4 points to Ipswich in third. They're pretty exposed all of a sudden.
I was going to say, in the psychological aspect of Leeds potentially going into the international break, top of the table, is huge, isn't it? We saw Leeds getting a foothold into second, even when games in hand were still coming into play. But when we just nudged into second, it starts to turn the narrative that way, doesn't it? And I know from reading like the Leicester forums and stuff like that, because bloody hell, I can't help myself, they're absolutely shitting their pants, Phil. They are shitting their pants. They think they're going to choke.
Well, and the points tally is so high that they should be virtually there by now. And that is what is so weird about this season, is that clubs who should otherwise be kind of deck chairs and cigars are a million miles from that, because nobody knows how this is going to fall, and everybody has been so strong. Obviously in the background for Leicester, there's the PSR aspect as well, and the question of what the breaches that we assume they've made of the financial limits are going to mean for them. We've been writing about this, and I think there is a kind of will on the EFL's part to try and impose something before the end of the season, but the time frame seems too short. It seems inconceivable that anything could happen before the beginning of May, and that if there is going to be any punishment for Leicester, it's probably going to run beyond then and beyond the season's conclusion. We haven't asked Farker about this yet. I think we certainly will do at the press conference when it comes up towards the end of the week. And you know what he's going to say. He'll say that it's nothing to do with him. It's not worth thinking about, not worth concentrating on. And as much as that's like this kind of stock answer that you get from a head coach or a manager, I think in this instance, he's probably right, because I don't think you would necessarily put any money on the PSR issues down at Leicester affecting the table as it stands or affecting the table this season. But it's clearly going on in the background, combined with the fact that the big lead that they had earlier in the season, or the big cushion that they had, is almost gone completely now. And it does tend to make you wobble. But again, Leeds have been very good at just it's been like tunnel vision really for Leeds, isn't it? Very much staying in the lane, doing what they have to do. And I just, I'm constantly impressed really with their ability to turn up and get it done. And I think that was the story of Friday. By the end of it, the first half was poor. It wasn't a great watch at all. Leeds didn't particularly get going, but it doesn't matter. It really does not matter. They're 100% at the stage now where it's all about results.
Did you manage to catch any of the Ipswich game at Cardiff Saturday lunchtime?
I didn't watch it in real time, although I've watched the highlights. And as I say, going into injury time, I assumed that they had that game done, and I think they will have done as well. But in a lot of respects, Cardiff have done to Ipswich what Ipswich have been doing to other teams quite regularly this season. And as I say, I think that will help them. That is a sore defeat, that one.
Yeah, I mean, when Kiefer Moore scored, I thought, well, there we go again. Typical. They've got the late goal. That'll be that. But I sat there and just rode it out. And I was upstairs in the bedroom because Sam, my lad, he was on his PlayStation downstairs. So I was watching it upstairs, and my wife was working in the dining room. And I screamed to such an extent when those two goals went in. I think it's a little bit like when Archie scored against Leicester. That sort of level of response, and she actually came to see if I was all right because I was screaming to such an extent. But it did, from a psychological point of view, that felt absolutely huge. And I think it's like you say, the first time we've probably seen somebody doing to them what they've done to so many other teams this season. And you just hope, don't you? At this point, you start to project and you think maybe that has a knock-on effect where they think actually we're not infallible. We don't win every time. We are capable of conceding late and of losing games. So long may it continue, Phil.
Yeah, to be fair to Ipswich, I think they got the recruitment right in January. I think they did the right things at the point where they needed an injection of something. And just, I mean, I say it again, they went through some really difficult games in that spell where they weren't picking up points. But they did need, they did need a bit of a reset and a restart. And Moore in particular, I think, has given them the sort of centre forward that they were lacking, or that they needed in addition to what else was there. So it's not. I think they've done the right things in order to get them back in the running. But when Leeds are playing like this and winning like this so regularly, and the form is as strong as it is, it's incredibly tough to keep up with. And even for Leicester, who've had this cushion and had this advantage and have really had the honour in the title race for such a long time now, even they can't keep up with this. They can't match the form that Farke's side are on. And when I was writing the piece after the game on Friday, I was leading off on the fact that in the summer, and when Leeds were doing the interview process for who was going to be manager after Allardyce, a lot of the people, or a number of the people involved in that, did what coaches tend to do these days, which is present. Coaches like to do big presentations where they explain what the tactics are going to be, how they're going to set the team up, squad building, everything else. And Farke kind of broke from protocol or convention, modern convention, by not doing that, and it wasn't quite as brisk as this. It wasn't as terse, but the nature of the conversation was basically, I've already won the championship twice. It hasn't changed that much since I was in it last time. I know what it's about. I know what I'm about. This is what I'll do. Take it or leave it, really. And if you take it, what you'll get is a team who have the gumption to have a really good go at promotion. And still at this point, despite the points tally, it's not to say that it's going to happen. But he's pretty much delivered on that. I think his confidence has been vindicated. And as we've said a few times now, there's going to be probably at least one club, if not two, who are going to have to put, big boy pants on and accept that even though they haven't finished top two, they have had very, very good and strong seasons. And I know that is tough to accept when it doesn't work out. But how do you argue with sides who are, heading for 95 points plus? You just can't.
It's nuts, isn't it? I've just worked out now, so forgive me if these numbers are wrong. Since that Southampton game at the end of September, so we're talking October onwards, of the 28 games Leeds have played, we've only dropped 18 points since that point.
Yeah.
And we have accrued 66 out of 84, which I think is absolutely, it's nuts, isn't it? It's like, that's 2.35 points per game. And we dropped 11 of those points over that December Christmas period as well.
It's phenomenal, really. And I do think there have been periods where it's almost been taken for granted slightly, or there's been this theme of, well, Farke's got a really good squad and this should kind of be happening. I mean, I was saying in the piece that if Leeds were kind of toiling at the moment to keep up with the playoffs or to get themselves into the top six, then there'd be big questions to answer because the squad is clearly better than that. But at the same time, I think this has been better perhaps than people have reflected. And it's that is not to say that if and when Leeds go up, Farke is necessarily the man who's going to do it in the Premier League. It absolutely will go up with Leeds and will crack on. But he's still got to prove after those 2 seasons with Norwich in the Premier League that he can do it at that level. But in isolation, this season, I don't really see how it could have been better. And for all that, from time to time, remember us discussing earlier in the season about, is the football a bit boring? Could it be more exciting or more engaging, more interesting? It's not prudent, is it, to break from a kind of formula or a plan which is working so regularly and so consistently? Because defensively they're extremely strong. They're scoring the goals that they need to score. They're doing it with flashes of class that other clubs, most clubs in the Championship just can't match because they don't have players of the same standard. And it's put them in the best. I mean, if Farke had said to the 49ers last summer, we will be in this position with 9 games to go, they wouldn't even have asked that of him, I don't think. I think he's gone beyond what they would have set as the benchmark to this point, because they just have been that good.
On the points per game at the minute, we're trending towards over 98, Phil, and that's obviously factoring in the early season wobble. So you could probably safely say 100 points is what it looks like we're going to get. And you would hope you would get to 100 points and that would take you up. But I was saying on the match ball, I looked at over the weekend, I looked at the number of points required to finish second, and I've worked backwards from sort of last season. And you're talking 91, 88, 91, 83. That's the season. That's the Bielsa season when we went up. 89, 90, 93, 89, 89, 93, 70, 79. So we'd be up already in 2012, 2013, 88 and 84. So you can see how exceptional this season has been by the top 4, can't you? Just by looking at those figures, that we would be within touching distance of promotion in any other season.
We'll put it this way: this is a season where you have to go up, because the frustration of not going up in a season like this when you've been this good would be absolutely immense, and repeating it second time round be extremely difficult. But I don't know. You just do sense a bit of quiet confidence with Farke that this has fallen into place, and that they're on the straight and narrow now. And he's a good knack, I think, of saying the right things at the right time. And we've talked before about how he tries to stress to the players about calmly going through the process. Use that awful phrase. But and also not to think too much about the bigger picture until they get down to the real sharp end of the season. But he's done the same, and when he speaks to us, when he speaks publicly, you get the same message. So it's not as if there's any inconsistency between what the players have been told and what he's actually saying. I don't imagine there's any inconsistency in his body language either, and it's definitely helped. It just feels like a dressing room who are on the same page, and on the same page as him. And when you look back now, it's not really a surprise to see them in this position, because you can see 100% why it's worked.
And he's been saying the same things all season. That's an important thing to stress. I think that the message has been consistent throughout. We'll see where we are at the end, and all of a sudden it's coming towards the end, and you're sitting in second place with a hell of a lot of destiny in your own hands.
Yeah, which is exactly what he would have looked for. He was talking about a little while back about the kind of steps that he was looking for Leeds to take, and the first one was just get house in order. Then it was to start knocking on the door of the top 6, and then to get into the top 6, and then after that to see what you can do beyond there. And that's how it's been. That's how it had to be, because there was so much to do in the summer and so much to resolve and to sort out, that, as he said on the day, I remember sitting with him in the stand the day he'd been appointed, and him saying, look, get ready for a bumpy start, because that's probably how it's going to be. You don't particularly want it to be like that, but we have to face facts and be realistic about what's going on round about us. So this wasn't ever going to be a season, I don't think, where Leeds were going to lead from the front, and absolutely haven't. And I think it's a big feather in his cap that they've, aside from automatic promotion, that they've put themselves in contention for the title. Because 2 or 3 months ago, I just did not see that happening. I wouldn't have ruled them at that stage out of finishing second at all because of how tight it was. But it just didn't feel as if Leicester were going to be reeled in.
Plenty more twists and turns to come, though, I'm sure. Let's not get too complacent just yet, Phil, because we know what happens when we make bold predictions, or you do anyway.
Yes, let's make none.
No.
Safest way.
But it does feel like we are, as a whole, by and large, as a fan base, being pretty philosophical about it all at the minute and heeding Farke's words, as I just touched on before there. Just see where we are at the end. And final thought, then, final question. How important do you think momentum is going into the final stage of the season? Because it feels like at the minute, having had a little minor wobble, again, I'm thinking Huddersfield Stoke, that with a win against Sheffield Wednesday, and if we can then replicate that against Millwall, and particularly, go into the break with the table Leeds on top, that would imply that momentum is being built up again. And I know you're only as good as your last result, but you know what I'm angling at. What do you reckon?
Well, I might ask Farke this at the back end of the week. I wonder whether he would have expected a run like this, 11 wins from 12, to have broken the back of the division. I wonder whether he's surprised that and there's no way he'll say yes, but whether he's surprised that they've put this run together and still it's a point to Ipswich behind them. Southampton are not a million miles adrift, and I know Southampton can make the same argument because they had that really long unbeaten run. But this, you were running through the points tallies that you needed for second place. This in a standard season would have done the trick. This would have been Leeds pretty much home and hosed. Momentum does matter. It definitely does matter when it comes to the feeling of tension around the stadium, around the squad, everything else. That said, if it's tight, sometimes it comes down to single games, doesn't it? And I think the game that will always stick out in my head under Bielsa will be the game at home to Wigan, which on Good Friday, which just seemed to come from nowhere, was totally inexplicable, was absolutely set up for Leeds to win at a canter. And given how good and organised and drilled and, how phenomenal they were under Bielsa, that game, I must go back and watch that game sometime to try and get my head around what actually happened and why on the day it was just such a disaster. And that, that pretty much killed the season in terms of automatic promotion. It was gone very quickly after that, when it felt like it was there for Leeds to take it. So yes, momentum does matter. And impetus can do the trick, but sometimes it does just come down to the odd weekend.
Final thing, then I'll let you get on your way, Phil. We will get back together towards the back end of the week and we'll preview Millwall. Just looking at the fixtures, not for the upcoming round or the one after. Easter Monday, we're talking about Easter being definitive. You've got Leicester playing Norwich, but you've also got Ipswich Southampton on the same day that we face Hull. It feels like that's going to be a pretty big one, that one, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I do think that's one of the most difficult games coming up for Leeds as well. I think Hull at home will be a hard fixture. They are looking good. They're starting to find a bit of rhythm. I think they'll quietly fancy themselves in the playoffs if they get into the playoffs. Hull, I think they'd have an outside chance. So yeah, it's going to be that'll be a big Monday. But I think genuinely this season you can say that every game is big because it is so tight, and it just as a really congested run of 4 teams for promotion, it just doesn't look like falling apart, does it? It doesn't seem like developing into suddenly 2 sides move away from the rest and get it wrapped up. It really does feel like this could go down to the last couple of games. Yeah,
definitely. One little final bit of narrative that has emerged over the weekend that Norwich fans have picked up on. Ipswich currently in 3rd, Norwich in 6th. I think they are sniffing the opportunity to face Ipswich in the playoff semi-finals, having finished 20 points behind them or more, and knock them out. That'd be quite something.
That'd be football, wouldn't it? Yeah. That would be football.
Yes. Right. We'll speak again towards the back end of the week. All right. Travel well, Phil, this week. Have a good one. And Millwall on Sunday. Then we'll all exhale for a couple of days, or we'll try to at least.
Good stuff. Thank you.
See you in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.